Hello, everyone. Welcome to Navigating the Jungle of Business. Today, navigating us through understanding emotional intelligence is my colleague and good friend, Susan Schwartz. Here's what I know about Susan. Susan's passion is equipping technical experts and teams with skills to become excellent leaders. Too often, subject matter experts are promoted for what they know and not their abilities to manage and mentor people. Then they fail up. This is so unnecessary. You know how I love knowing people's why, and Susan's is equipping new leaders with leadership skills so that instead of failing up, they can succeed forward. So, Susan, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I always love to spend time with you.
And me with you. So this is going to be fun. So here's my first question for you. Why is it important for entrepreneurs to be emotionally intelligent?
Well, it gets down to the matter of business, closing sales and profitability. And there was a study a couple of years ago where the top 21% of sales executives were asked what was their secret sauce? What did they have that other people didn't? And all 21% of them said that it was emotional intelligence.
Wow, I'm surprised they even knew what the term was. That's exciting.
Well, so what's going on with the other 79% of us? We are not performing up to our capabilities. So I know entrepreneurials are drivers. They want to win and be first. So it will help them get there faster if they pay attention.
So when I first studied emotional intelligence, one of the things that really excited me was that you can change your emotional intelligence, whereas your IQ, as opposed to your EQ, you can't change your IQ, but you can your EQ. So that's why it makes it such an important topic.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But the one thing that I like to caution people about is you can't have too much or too little.
Well, that's
you
true.
have always just enough because that's who you are. I use an assessment that uses 15 traits. And it's really exciting to me because how do you measure empathy? How do you measure impulse control? Humility, all of those things. And what it does is it creates a series of color-coded bars that I put onto a normal curve so you can see the balance. And then just like you said, you get to make the choice. Do you bring people on your team to help you balance things out? Or do you get some coaching or take a class and figure out how to engage yourself more? And just because you fall on, say, it's a standard deviation, just because you're on the lower, less engaged, I hate to use that word lower, less engaged side of the curve is not a bad thing. For example, I met an architect who had zero flexibility. But if you think about it, the architect can't have any flexibility. I live in San Francisco now, and there are 2 buildings that people cannot live in because they're leaning.
Wow.
That architect said, ooh, a half an inch won't matter. But this architect was put in charge of 2 teams of people. And he had a great deal of difficulty communicating with them because he had no flexibility.
Oh,
When you manage people, you have to set guidelines, but you gotta have, live a little bit of gray in there. And so that explained why he had challenges. And he can choose to work with people to figure out when you use your flexibility and where you stand your ground. And he'd been an architect for 20 years. That's a really hard trait to unlearn or bend a bit.
Wow. So I'm kind of laughing because I was the managing partner of an architectural firm. And whenever
Didn't
something
know.
went wrong, the head architect would say, well, that's a job condition. So for me, the word job condition meant something wasn't done right. Anyway, next question. Entrepreneurs are very busy. What do you say when someone tells you they don't have time to slow down?
Well, I'm going to say it's a mindset. It's not that you have to slow down to a stop, but take a breath and pay attention. If the whole, when I talk about emotional intelligence, I talk about it as an action verb.
Mhm.
You are in constant motion. You are moving really fast. And when there's a problem or a challenge, and when do you not have 3 or 4 a day? You need to, for that moment in time, stop to observe what is going on. I always like to say the Titanic didn't sink because of the big iceberg above the water.
Right.
It sank because of what you couldn't see below the water. So the, in a just standing on one foot, emotional intelligence is about paying attention. So you observe what's going on, you have the information at hand, you have your experience, and then you choose how you're going to move forward, how you're going to direct people to move forward to achieve the outcome that you want. I'm not suggesting that you go through a 5-week analysis before making that decision. Now, maybe if you're an engineer of some kind and you're going to have to set that, that's in your schedule. You're going to do that. That's scheduled. But something's going to come up. There's going to be a hiccup. And it's just to be present, to pay attention in that moment. And there is, when I talk about just paying attention and also taking a breath, if you take 2 breaths before you say something you might wish you hadn't said, so in the heat of the moment,
In that gap?
in that gap, just take 2 deep breaths. Again, I'm not suggesting you stop, but coast, don't put on the brakes, just coast for a minute and take 2 deep breaths. And the reason is the first breath gets oxygen to your brain, which helps you think more clearly. The second breath is so that everybody else will take a breath with you. So you're modeling good behavior. They're getting oxygen to their brains, and you're going to have a much more reasonable conversation.
So with my clients, often I tell them you have to slow down in order to speed up. But then what often happens, someone will tell me they're so overwhelmed, they're so busy. And I say to them, what happens when you have the flu? When you actually have to check out for a little bit because you're sick. Do you ever have the flu? And they say, oh yeah. Well, guess what? You can have the flu this week. Take 2 days to catch up. And they always look at me in shock, but you know what? That works because it really hits home that you do occasionally have to stop.
Yes. And I worked with somebody who was feeling totally overwhelmed, and she couldn't imagine taking 2 days off. But what she agreed to try was she scheduled 2 hours, one on Monday and one on Thursday. And it was blocked off on her schedule. And that was her time to collect herself and gather her up. So she could manage 2 1-hour blocks.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So unless somebody else is putting people in your calendar, which often happens for CEOs because they have an assistant who books them all day and then they complain. So here's another question. Is it possible to have too much emotional intelligence? Is that like being too rich or too skinny?
That is a great analogy. The answer is you can't have too much or too little because you are who you are. And it concerns me when someone will call me and say, Susan, this person has no emotional intelligence. I need you to work with them. I need you to give them emotional intelligence. And the secret is we all have it inside of us. Um, how when you're really being your best self, how it appears to the world will be different. Exactly what you were just talking about is different people have different priorities and they have different areas where they're more engaged than others. But the key is that you are who you are, and how do you leverage your strengths? So yes, we all have those areas. I wouldn't even say improve on. We just have those areas where we choose to bring somebody else that we can shine some light on that will make the team successful.
When you took your own assessment,
Mhm.
it's a trick question.
Okay.
What was the one thing you thought you needed to improve on? And then I'll share mine in all fairness.
Well, initially it was impulse control.
Ha,
You know
yeah.
me, I don't have a whole lot. However, what one of my strongest areas was was reality testing.
Ah,
And my favorite job of all time was a product manager. I was working for a startup. It was a training company, so it was very small. And my projects, I had 90 days to create it and 90 days to get a profit. And
wow.
so I had to know my client very, very well. So the best part about it is I would spend a few days thinking way outside the box, all these crazy, crazy ideas. And then my reality, my analytical part, would go through and check off the boxes. This won't work. This won't work. Ooh, this has a possibility. How could we adapt it? And and that was what I really loved. So today I still try to take 2 breaths. I try really hard to listen. I sit on my hands. I, squeeze my fingers together to remind me to be quiet. Um,
So I find it interesting because reality testing was one of mine. Reality testing and impulse control. So the reality testing is very common to entrepreneurs because in order to be optimistic and see opportunities where other people don't, in a way, that kind of needs to serve you in, to some regard. And then, of course, you have to really check in and see if just your mother says the project's a good idea or other people validate it, right?
Right.
The night before my son's rehearsal dinner, I was walking by a store and I saw the most gorgeous set of Italian boots. And I thought to myself, I really wanted those boots. But then my mind said, you know what? Slow down a minute. Those are expensive. You don't really need them. So what I did was I went into the store, I got the card, and a week later, I still wanted them, so I ordered them. That's how I deal with impulse control now. I don't allow myself to just do something, but it's because it's a strategy to get over it. That's what you need. Strategy.
right. Well, and that's the whole point. Everything is a strategy.
Yeah.
So I've been working with business partners where they still have the same vision, the company's growing, but there's this itch. They have the same vision. They really like working together. But if you don't take care of it, somebody said a business divorce. Well, and I don't think it's that bad. But like one group of people, one made decisions too quickly, and the other made decisions too slowly. And when we ran their EQI assessment, the entrepreneur of the group was like, had no impulse control. He saw ideas, he wanted to grab it. When he talked with a client, he wanted to close the deal. He promised the sky. Now, his other partner was the operations director. And she knew exactly how much money was in the bank. She knew all the logistics. And when he started promising the moon and she knew she couldn't deliver, she wanted to wave. And And then there were other times where she was getting into the weeds and the, entrepreneur felt like that they were going to lose the client because it was getting too deep and he wanted away. So, it took like a total of 2 hours in conversation and then a third hour coming together. And we realized that the decision making too quickly and too slowly only happened in front of the clients. When they were on their own, they really balanced each other. I don't want to say they duked it out physically, but they could raise their voices and they would push each other. And it was all on the, good business energy. But they were afraid of losing face, the other one losing face in front of the client. And so they came up with a code word.
Oh, fascinating.
So that, the operations person could say, I think there are a couple things we haven't considered. I think this needs an X analysis.
Aha. And this is why I love assessments, because I think it's so important for teams to know the balance of emotional intelligence, or whether it's their communication style with DISC. They can get across so many roadblocks if they only took the time for assessments, right?
Right. And then when we came together, they each understood who they were as people and why they were such a good group of two business partners. What made them each crazy, what made that itch about the other was really based on their basic personality. So you're not going to change who you are, but you can make a decision. You can create a strategy to get the outcome, that you want it to have. So
this leads me to the last question. How does emotional intelligence impact business results? From everything we've said, sounds like it has a tremendous impact.
Yes. We started out talking about, 21% of the population acknowledged that it was their strength. But as a leader, somebody who inspires people, and you need to be a manager when you're still a very small startup organization. So sometimes there's two sets of skills. When you get larger, you have the visionary, and then you have the person that makes that vision happen. When you're really small, you kind of have to be both. Am I right?
Oh, yes.
So I've recently discovered a term called mattering at work.
Yes.
And mattering at work is where Fermi knows that you're really competent at what you do. And you know that your work really matters to the organization. If your manager doesn't come up and say, Fermi, you are doing a fabulous job. I really appreciate how you worked extra hard last week and met our deadline. Then you feel validated. There are times where they don't recognize you or they give you a short shrift, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden you either feel like just a cog in the wheel or you're totally diminished. And when that happens, you disengage.
Right.
And when you disengage, it's proven that there's more absenteeism. There's turnover. Safety goes down, which then causes more absenteeism and more money outlays, and performance quality goes down.
Right.
And altogether, that costs the US economy back in 2020, before the pandemic, it was estimated at over $400 billion.
Wow.
That costs the US economy.
I would say.
So that is huge. And the Gallup organization, they've created an engagement survey with 12 questions. Because they're Gallup, they're able to have companies who work with them. So they had people do the engagement survey 1 year. They put together just some I don't think any cost programs, getting people to pay attention, include people in, helping to make decisions, stopping and asking people's opinions. And the engagement went doubled. Like 1 in 4 might have said that they thought that their decisions counted. When 2 in 4 people said their decisions counted, they were able to track the business results. So overall, creating this more engaged workplace, the Gallup group, for their how many companies they had out there internationally, there was a 41% decrease in absenteeism. Is
That's
that
interesting.
huge? You don't have to hire a temp.
Mhm.
There's more continuity. You're going to meet your schedule. The retention rate went up 22%. And profits went up 12%.
I love when you talk about numbers.
So you can tell I'm on my new soapbox because engagement is so important. It is, the dollars are there.
So, one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking is, yes, it's important for leaders to tell their people that they matter, but when is it important for leaders to hear that they matter? Isn't that an interesting thought?
Well, people model good behavior.
Right.
So and that's a good part of this white paper that I'm working on is how do you create those workplaces with a positive culture?
Mhm.
So it's not like, we all have kids who played soccer where everybody gets a trophy.
Right.
And I'm getting old enough that the new CEOs were some of those people who got a trophy.
That's right.
But it's letting people know that you appreciate their work. It's including them on making decisions, asking their opinion. You don't necessarily need to take it, but include them in the conversation so they know why another decision was made. Little things like recognition.
Mhm.
And different recognition doesn't have to be, $100 gift card somewhere. Sometimes it's acknowledging them in a team meeting, or maybe everybody does really well. So you bring ice cream in on a Friday afternoon, or depending where you are, it could be, something a little more bubbly.
Sign me up for ice cream. I'm in.
Right. Or one person, there are software programs out there. He ran a customer service desk. They were an IT service provider. So their clients they always pulled the clients and they would monitor what the client said. And there was a way that when one person helped another, because not everybody knows everything, the person who was helped could reach out and say, Alice really helped me today. I want to thank her. And so there were all these points. And at the end, you get up to a certain level, you get a reward. Well, some people wanted like a gift card, coffee gift card. Many of them wanted an afternoon off.
Yeah.
And, again, they're salaried. And it's not that they shouldn't come to work, but if they've done a really good job and you give them 3 or 4 hours off as a reward, that buys a lot of loyalty.
Absolutely. So
So
as we wind this up, do you have any final words of wisdom to share?
I think it goes back to I like to call I like to use the phrase an emotionally intelligent leader.
Mm-hmm.
And emotionally intelligent leaders create those positive workplaces
Mm-hmm.
where people are encouraged to collaborate. They're encouraged to communicate civilly. You're allowed to disagree. That's really a good thing.
Sure.
Um,
Respect.
and that encourages people to be accountable,
Mm-hmm.
not to accept blame as a standard operating procedure, but to be accountable, to be supportive, to be collaborative. And it all comes back to starting with respect and paying attention so that people know that you are being present, that you know what's going on. And, trust is built. And that's how people will come back and engage you. and trust you. It's a two-way street.
Mhm.
But it's really about creating respectful, collaborative environment.
Wonderful. I love it. So, Susan, tell our viewers how best to contact you.
How best to contact me. I can be found on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And if you wanted to, my website is www.riverbirchgroup, the BIRCH as the tree, .com. And my email is susan@riverbirchgroup.com.
And you have such a lovely logo too.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you so much. So, everyone, I'm Dr. Fumi Rachel Barr, and this is Navigating the Jungle of Business. See you next time. Thanks again, Susan.
Thank you for me.